The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
On February 5th, 1968, Goldie Hawn made her first appearance on the sketch comedy show Rowan and Martin's Laughin. She didn't do much on her debut. She introduced a segment or two. She's featured in the background of some group sketches. In fact, in the hour-long episode, her screen time clocks in at approximately a whopping minute and a half. Who could possibly have guessed on that night in February 1968 that Fred Astaire would call her name at the Academy Awards and crown her the Best Supporting Actress of 1969 for her performance in Cactus Flower? Few actors rise to mega fame as quickly as Goldie Hawn. So what was it about Goldie Hawn that captivated audiences so thoroughly? Why might Academy voters have been excited to vote for her over the other nominees? In this video, I hope to find out. But before we get started, I want to give a huge thanks to MUBI for sponsoring this video. MUBI is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/BeKindRewind. Goldie Hawn was born in Washington, D.C. and quickly took to performing as a child. A ballet dancer from a young age, she briefly studied drama at American University, but dropped out and headed for New York City, where she hoped to start dancing in the chorus on Broadway. She did some stage work in summer stock, but kept afloat by becoming a can-can dancer and a go-go girl at trendy joints like the Peppermint Lounge and seedier spots like Dudes and Dolls. Eventually, those gigs began to wear on her.
And he said, when you go on your break, there's a guy at the bar who wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, that's nice. I said, but I don't do that. I'm just a dancer. He said, well, no, that's part of what you have to do. I said, well, then I'm leaving. I quit. And I picked up my bag and took my mesh tights and my fringed outfit, and I left.
So Hawn made her way to Los Angeles, where she nabbed a small role as Giggly Girl in the 1967 Disney film The One and Only Genuine Original Family Band, and a gig as a dancer in an Andy Griffith television special, where she was noticed by an agent named Art Simon. Simon told her to call him, which Hawn didn't take very seriously. She'd been told that by shady characters before. But the next day, he called her from William Morris, an agency with some of the most famous clientele in the business. He signed her, and from there, opportunities would blossom.
Good morning, world!
Good Morning World was a CBS sitcom about a radio morning show host named Dave. Dave and his right-hand man, Larry, work together to make the best, most entertaining show they can, while their stiff boss keeps a controlling eye on them. Dave must also, of course, keep his lovely wife happy at home, as she gets into all sorts of antics with their quirky neighbors while he's at work. If this description sounds suspiciously close to the Dick Van Dyke Show, well, that's intentional. That show ended in 1966, and the network was still in pursuit of the displaced Dick Van Dyke audience. So the team behind the show got together and essentially remade it, only this time about disc jockeys instead of comedy writers. Goldie plays Sandy Kramer, who is basically the equivalent of the Millie role in the Dick Van Dyke Show. The neighbor who pops in every now and again and whose kooky energy complements the wife character's normalcy. It's a common sitcom archetype, but Hawn puts her personal stamp on the character well, imbuing Sandy with that bubbly spirit audiences would come to know and love, and foreshadowing the type she'd famously embody on Laughin, the dumb blonde. You can watch full episodes of Good Morning World on YouTube, and I have to say, it's really hard to watch a show that feels exactly like the Dick Van Dyke Show, but doesn't have any of the special sauce that show had. Audiences and critics seemingly felt the same way because Good Morning World didn't last very long. As one critic put it, its similarities to the Dick Van Dyke Show didn't do it any favors. It walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, even looks like a duck, but a duck it ain't. The show was canceled after one season. Luckily, Hawn already had something lined up.
From their beautiful studios in downtown Burbank, NBC presents Rowan and Martin's Laughin.
In January 1968, NBC was in search of a mid-season replacement for the underperforming spy show The Man from U.N.C.L.E. The network turned to comedians Dan Rowan and Dick Martin, who had hosted a successful special the previous year called Laughin. Perhaps the special could be repurposed into an hour-long weekly variety show to save the ailing time slot. Airing opposite Gunsmoke and The Lucy Show on CBS was no easy task. Martin called the time slot the worst pit any show had ever been thrown into. But Laughin was truly unlike anything anyone had seen before, and by the end of the season, Laughin topped all other regular shows in the ratings, finishing with a 43% share of the audience to Gunsmoke's 34% and Lucy's 31%. It stayed number one for 2 seasons straight. So what distinguished Laughin from other sketch comedy or variety shows? First, it had an equal opportunity sense of humor. Hip enough to appeal to youth culture, but also not anti-establishment enough to alienate older viewers. Second, it exploded the formal elements of sketch comedy on television. Hal Erickson writes in his critical history of the show, the traditional opening monologue, 10-minute sketches, and splashy closing production numbers were bypassed or jettisoned altogether in favor of blackouts, running gags, and one-liners. The standard cause and effect, even flowing continuity, was sliced and diced to a fare thee well, resulting in an anarchistic leapfrogging from segment to segment, dispensing sketches, jokes, and puns with such a relentless rapidity that the audience was literally defied not to laugh, even at the oldest gags and biggest groaners. If you haven't watched an episode of Laughin', 1, do that, they're free to watch on Tubi, and 2, the pace might feel slightly surprising because I don't think any sketch show since has come close to matching its staccato rhythms and freewheeling focus. Sketches can last 30 seconds or 1 second. Sometimes they aren't sketches at all, but visual gags or riffs on the same idea repeated again and again. The pace is the most important thing, Rowan told the New York Times. No one is really interested anymore in sitting for a long time or listening to or watching one thing. The old days are over. 15-minute comedy sketches are over. It's a form of comedy made for short attention spans, which is exactly why I actually think scrolling through TikTok best approximates what watching Laughin' is like. You're not there for narrative fulfillment, really. One thing might not connect to the next. It's a punchline, and you move on. In that way, Laughin' was extremely ahead of its time. And for what it's worth, I think modern comedy could take more from Laughin's structure than it currently does. But it was also of its time. Some jokes on Laughin' didn't age well at all. Some are only funny to the freaks who watch this channel and enjoy topical references from 1968.
I understand there's a new cocktail. It's called the William F. Buckley. 3 drinks, and you don't know what you're talking about.
Really, you can think of Laughin' as a precursor to SNL, and in kind of literal ways, Lorne Michaels was a writer on Laughin'. It was a launching pad for new comedic voices where they could test characters, where politicians made splash appearances, where celebrities could poke fun at themselves or current events. The cast of Laughin' proved vital to the show's success. While assembling a roster of new talent, Carolyn Raskin, a producer on the show, noticed Goldie Hawn and immediately brought her to the attention of executive producer George Schlatter. He told The Hollywood Reporter, "She said I had to see her. And I said, what am I going to do with a dancer? I'm doing a comedy show. She told me when Goldie was on stage, nobody can look anywhere else. She was right. That adorable, warm, loving person just popped out of the camera at you." Schlatter initially thought Hawn might make a good billboard girl, someone to introduce upcoming segments, which is essentially what she does in her first episode. But when taping these segments, Schlatter and company happened upon something special. Hawn wasn't used to reading cue cards and stuttered through her lines, prompting an effervescent, nervous giggle. Hawn later said, "I was supposed to do some introduction straight, like, here's Dan. I goofed, I missed the cue. I seemed oblivious to everything around me. They laughed, so I capitalized on my mistakes." Erickson writes, "Any other producer might have found her reaction annoying, but Schlatter found it adorable and used the last giggly take on the program. He also kept another take when, after making her way through a convoluted scripted sentence, Goldie looked askance and asked, 'Did that make sense?' Schlatter promptly devised a new policy. Never stop this woman. Never say cut to this woman. Gaffes became a major part of the Goldie Hawn package. They wanted to elicit those kinds of reactions, so Hawn was never allowed to rehearse or see her cue cards ahead of time. Sometimes the writers would even sabotage her cue cards, inverting the words or reordering them to ensure that she would screw it up. You truly never knew what was going to come out of her mouth, and that was the whole bit.
And now here's another news of, and now here's the news of the past. Now Laughin news of the future as, I did it again. And now Laughin looks at the news of the future as we present the news of the future.
Many of the cast members on Laughin had specific characters they performed again and again. Lily Tomlin had Ernestine and Edith Ann. Artie Johnson had Wolfgang, a Nazi soldier who had no clue that the war was over. Goldie Hawn didn't have a character per se. Instead, Goldie Hawn became her character, a full-time embodiment of the dumb blonde archetype. With her gaffes and jokes like,
"My IQ has never been questioned. Come to think about it, it's never been mentioned."
Hawn quickly became known as a pure gold dum-dum, a charming scatterbrain, America's dumbest sweetheart. In interviews, she often spoke about herself in the third person in order to emphasize the difference between her real self and her TV self. She talks about what Goldie would do, referring to her Laughin self as though she were someone else. The TV Goldie isn't dumb exactly, naive, innocent, gullible. She's like a child. I get a lot of fan mail because people identify with her. People loved this gimmick. Hawn quickly became one of the most popular regulars on the show. Erickson writes, though she appeared for an average of only 48 seconds in her first 3 Laughins, Goldie Hawn was soon receiving more fan mail than any other regular. Flattering comparisons to Judy Holliday flooded newspapers. Some observers predicted that Goldie Hawn would become as big a star as the late Marilyn Monroe. You can imagine, though, the dumb blonde routine could get a little tiring. At first, the "oops, I messed up my lines" giggle was genuine. But after a while, she came to anticipate getting thrown off and had to consciously work harder and harder with each passing episode to get herself nervous up. She told TV Guide in June of 1968, "It's so frustrating. I've been a dancer all my life, but I don't dance on the Rowan and Martin show. People ask me, are you really that dumb? I want to get out of this dumb bag." She also had the displeasure of being one of the literal billboard girls, female members of the cast who would dance with slogans painted all over them as transitions between sketches. Schlatter told The Hollywood Reporter, "The most sought-after job at NBC was painting words on Goldie. But to her, the process was a drag. She had to sit for hours, and the paint had an overpowering stench. It's not that she was unhappy necessarily on Laughin, but she did get very famous very quickly, and not in a way that she could have anticipated." Unsurprisingly, Hawn sought new material, and given how popular she was, casting agents were quick to oblige. Soon, Hawn won a role in Cactus Flower. Based on the play by Abe Burrows, Cactus Flower unravels the love triangle between Dr. Julian Winton, a dentist played by Walter Matthau, Stephanie, his dedicated but icy hygienist, played by Ingrid Bergman, and Tony, his naive young girlfriend. Julian doesn't want to marry Tony, so he lies and tells her that he can't possibly commit because he's already married. After she attempts suicide in despair that she can never have him, he decides it's finally time to marry her. Tony, however, worries about the fate of his fictional wife and children and demands to meet them to confirm a divorce won't ruin their lives. So Julian recruits Stephanie to join him in the ruse by playing his wife, unaware that she too is deeply in love with him. Chaos ensues. The director of the film, Gene Saks, said in an interview, "I auditioned her 3 times before I made my selection. I kept trying to convince myself it was the television show that made me want her, but she finally won out over her reputation because she has something the part needed. There's something so vulnerable about her that you're compelled to care about her, watch her, and be attracted to her." Hawn's casting was also aided by Mike Frankovich, the former director of Columbia Pictures, which was distributing Cactus Flower. and who had recently moved into independent producing. He insisted that she star in the film and signed Hawn to a multi-picture deal that would last into the early 1970s. For what it's worth, he also produced films for fellow Best Supporting Actress nominee Diane Cannon and the 42nd Academy Awards ceremony. Upon the announcement of her casting, the press asked the question, was Frankovich taking too risky a gamble? Could America's dumbest sweetheart pull off more complex acting work? 40 million viewers know the giggles, the stammers, the sexy innocence of Goldie Hawn, Laughin's lovable blonde kook in residence, who was recently nominated for an Emmy. But can she act? Of course she could. Cactus Flower really expanded the notion of what Hawn could achieve as an actor. Laughin limited Hawn to a caricature, and its breakneck pace limited the scope of skills that she could demonstrate. Here, abrupt cuts didn't interrupt or inform her performance. Audiences got a more thorough sense of her comedic timing. They watched her stand up for herself, outwit others, fall in love, and reach emotional catharsis, all while holding her own alongside veterans like Matthau and Bergman. If I'm being honest with myself, do I think this is a jaw-dropping comedic debut? Probably not. But Hawn's performance in Cactus Flower does feel delightfully surprising if you watch it right after binge-watching season 1 of Laughin, as I did for this video. And if you already had a lot of affection for her because she appeared in your living room every week, I could imagine how exciting watching her play Tony must have felt. She looked like ripe material for a promising screen career. Her performance was flawless. She made a smashing film debut. She was funny, tragic, remained in step with the super performances surrounding her. In February 1970, it was announced that she was nominated for the Best Supporting Actress Oscar alongside Catherine Burns in Last Summer, Diane Cannon in Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, Sylvia Miles in Midnight Cowboy, and Susanna York in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? In Midnight Cowboy, Sylvia Miles plays Cass, the first woman Joe Buck sleeps with upon his arrival to New York City from Texas. Buck, who came to the city to pursue sex work, believes he's landed his first client. But when he asks Cass for money, she revolts and ends up hustling him instead. He pays her. Midnight Cowboy would eventually win Best Picture, which often increases an actor's odds at winning their own prize. But Miles appears for just a few minutes at the beginning of the film. Like, I just described to you the entirety of her performance. So while the critics liked what they saw, they also didn't find it substantial enough to merit a win, and occasionally wondered why Brenda Vaccaro hadn't been nominated instead. I could only find one prediction that Miles might take home the prize, based on the fact that the Academy loves prostitute roles. Susanna York appeared in two of the most critically acclaimed British films of the 1960s, Tom Jones and A Man for All Seasons, both of which won Best Picture. So it was only a matter of time before the Academy recognized York, who supplied compelling supporting performances in both. 1968 was an interesting year for York. She played a lesbian in The Killing of Sister George and filmed a now tame but then highly controversial sex scene, which attracted significant media attention, including profiles in both the LA Times and the New York Times, written by Nora Ephron, no less. In They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, she plays Alice, an aspiring actress from London competing in a dance marathon, a Depression-era trend in which couples would dance for as long as they possibly could in order to win cash prizes. Alice is frail and desperate to be noticed and perceived as elegant by talent scouts. As the contest continues, her mental state deteriorates, and she must exit the competition. York is quite good in this, and it's surprising in retrospect that her performance didn't get more traction among the Oscar prognosticators. At least one person, though, didn't like her performance, and that was York herself. She found her own work dreadful, saying in an interview, "I felt a ghastly, sickening thud when I got nominated and tried to get unnominated. It angered me to be nominated without being asked. I was actually appalled. I didn't think I had a chance, and I didn't think that much of myself in it." In Last Summer, Catherine Burns plays Rhoda, a teenager vacationing on Fire Island who meets a trio of friends who have captured an injured seagull. Rhoda is sensitive and inexperienced, so the group takes her under their wing, alternatingly encouraging her to push herself out of her comfort zone and bullying her for being a late bloomer. Their abuse escalates, culminating in a violent sexual assault. For a while, this film was impossible to find, partly because it received an X rating for its chilling ending. I have to imagine that's why it's not regularly programmed or cited as one of the most incisive, disturbing coming-of-age stories of the 1960s. I've linked to where you can watch it for free in the description. Byrne's performance is a major reason the film works as well as it does. She generated Oscar buzz right away for her arresting monologue toward the end of the film, in which Rhoda describes the death of her mother. It's so truthfully rendered and heartbreaking, the kind of monologue that really tends to attract critical favor. And it did. She became an underdog favorite among many critics. Roger Ebert wrote, "The way Kathy Burns performs this scene cannot quite be described in any kind of writing I know about. It is the best single scene of acting I've seen in a contemporary film." Rex Reed even touted her performance with his, usual panache.
And my favorite actress in the supporting actress category was a wonderful little girl who I thought gave one of the most startling...
Kathy Burns?
Kathy Burns in Last Summer. And I don't think Hollywood knows who she is. I really don't think they're aware of her. I think they'll give it to Diane Cannon because she finally had Cary Grant's baby.
He's not wrong about Burns, at least. With Broadway credits and a TV movie under her belt, she was a true newcomer to film. And it's not just that people didn't really know who she was, it's also that when they did talk about her, they were actively cruel about her physical appearance. Dick Kleiner, a syndicated columnist, wrote, 20 years ago, they wouldn't have let her inside a studio gate, while Vincent Canby said she was shaped like a fat mushroom. Burns, understandably, struggled with the attention the film brought her and seeing herself on the big screen, becoming extremely critical of herself in interviews. Scott Feinberg recently wrote a piece detailing how Burns recoiled from the industry and eventually stopped acting altogether. Rex Reed may have approached the topic inelegantly, but it was true that most people knew who Diane Cannon was in 1969 because she had been married to Cary Grant and had gone through a very public, chaotic divorce with him. Just a few months ago, the mention of the name Diane Cannon always evoked the same reaction. Oh yeah, that's Cary Grant's former wife. So much of her press coverage at this time was about shaking off the ex-Mrs. Cary Grant image. Although Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice was not her film debut, the film certainly dispelled that image and announced Cannon as a true talent. The film follows two couples who embark on a process of reevaluating the meaning of marriage. What is the difference between physical and romantic love? Should marriage restrict a person's sexual pursuits? Cannon plays Alice, the most hesitant of the foursome to embrace that kind of sexual freedom. Alice is easily the best role in this category, and Cannon plays it with such a delicious specificity. I'm thinking specifically about the scene where she's in therapy. The anxiety wrought by her pearl clutching results in some truly clever, funny choices that, and here's one of the highest compliments I can give an actor, kind of remind me of Lee Grant. Cannon won the New York Film Critics Circle Award, and the bulk of the predictions I read about this race anticipated that she would win. But the film's probing of marriage ethics seemed to turn off some moviegoers. When it was selected to open the New York Film Festival, for example, Time magazine was outraged that it was chosen to open a presumably serious film festival. Pauline Kael wrote in her glowing review of the film, "If one laughs at it, as I did, one may suspect either A, that even as good as American commercial comedy as this is too American and too commercial for the kind of futzy film festival thinking that splits movies into art versus entertainment, or B, that there's something about the film that bugs people. It's both, I think." This tension speaks to a problem many critics were writing about come Oscar season. New Hollywood was knocking on the door, offering films like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Bonnie and Clyde, Easy Rider, etc., etc., etc. And yet the Academy, broadly populated by members from another era of filmmaking, seemed reluctant to embrace them. Old Hollywood was in the process of disintegration, according to critic Vincent Canby, touched by an unwillingness to admit the passage of time. This led to the perception that the Oscars were kind of stuck in the mud. The ceremony had begun to suffer because the audience had moved past its taste and didn't want to tune in just to watch their favorites lose again. There's a filmmaking revolution in progress, but you couldn't prove it by the Oscar nominations released by the Motion Picture Academy, one critic wrote. Of the 5 movies nominated as Best Picture of 1969, plus films which figured into other categories of nomination, only a few reflect the sort of youth orientation which has made Hollywood reassess its whole star and studio system. The results of the 42nd Academy Awards exemplify this tension really well. On the one hand, Midnight Cowboy won Best Picture. On the other hand, the thing that got more coverage than anything else that night was John Wayne's Best Actor win for True Grit, a win the industry considered a long time coming. Wayne was a superstar in an anti-star era, a highly visible symbol of what might be Hollywood's last hurrah. So the same Academy that was excited by Midnight Cowboy was equally capable of affectionately looking backward, reluctant to abandon what the industry had been. In my mind, Goldie Hawn splits the difference between these two sensibilities. As an enormously popular television star, she felt uniquely modern and part of the day-to-day experience of living in 1969. But her persona harkened back to a familiar archetype crafted for the heyday of studio system stardom, and her film comfortably acknowledged modern culture without dipping its toe into controversy or progressivism. Swinging and cheating are much easier to joke about in a farcical context, after all. Still, Hawn was consistently described as a surprise winner of the evening. It was a surprise to Hawn herself.
And I was making, there's a girl in my soup in London with Peter, and I just forgot that they were on television that night. So I got a call saying, "Goldie, way to go, you got it." And I said, "I got what?" He said, "You got the Academy Award, you won Best Supporting Actress." And I went, "Oh my God, I didn't know they were on television last night."
Wow.
And it was like one of those stories. It's just like, oh my God, I can't believe it.
Raquel Welch accepted the award on her behalf. Hawn never actually watched the footage of her win until 2023. A friend asked, "Did you ever see the part where you were being announced by Fred Astaire?" And I said, "Fred Astaire? He's my idol. I didn't know he's the one that announced my name. I got emotional when I finally saw it," she told Variety. With a future in feature films virtually guaranteed, Hawn agreed to see out the remainder of her contract at Laughin and exited the show in January of 1970. She made a triumphant return with a guest appearance in season 4, and the rest is history.
Nice. Goldie, I worked with you last year. I'm Lily Talbot.
Oh, yes, you're the dumb one.
I'm curious, if you've seen these films, who would you vote for? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching. Before you run off to watch Cactus Flower yourself, I want to say thank you again to MUBI for sponsoring this video. MUBI is a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. Awards shows are always so fascinating to me, and I'm guessing since you're watching this video, you feel the same. In that case, may I recommend MUBI's curated series, Golden Palms, Lions, and Bears, award-winning greats, which highlights some of the cinematic epics and underseen gems crowned by awards bodies around the world. I'd like to highlight 2 films in this series specifically because they're some of my absolute favorites from the last decade. Hirokazu Koreeda's Monster is an intricately structured drama about a young boy who begins to display strange behavior at school. The root cause of his anxieties seems straightforward at first, but you quickly come to realize that nothing in this film is that straightforward. The film shifts from point of view to illuminate new perspectives and challenge your assumptions in the most heart-wrenching ways. Andrew Hay's film, 45 Years, is the portrait of a marriage plunged into crisis when ghosts from the past reemerge as the couple plans their 45th wedding anniversary. How might one discovery affect the ways in which a husband and wife view the decades they spent together? This is the kind of film where a furrowed brow can feel like a gut punch. Charlotte Rampling's measured performance channels such specific anxieties about security in relationships, and I truly cannot recommend it enough. Thankfully, because MUBI is sponsoring this video, you can watch both of these films right now for free. All you have to do is click the link in my description and you're set. Just go to MUBI.com/BeKindRewind and you'll get a whole month free. Access a world of cinema right now with just one click. Get your month free at MUBI.com/BeKindRewind today.